Hi guys. Good morning, good evening from wherever you have joined the Azure Community Conference. Today, I would like to take you through the challenges with the data science community faces and one of the methods of, say, operationalizing your machine learning models, putting them into production, how we could put a machine learning model which people deploy into production. This is just one of the ways, but there are other ways as well possible, which I have talked in few of my blog posts. I will just provide the link to the blog post. Let's start. We do have somebody join. Yeah. So let's start with today's session. We see that a very common problem which the industry yeah. So the let's talk about the nature of the machine learning models first. So you see the difference between a normal machine learning model and say a normal software engineering process wherein you develop a project using Java or C Sharp is that your Java or C Sharp code is basically deterministic, but your machine learning codes will never be deterministic. So when I say deterministic, I mean to say that given a particular set of inputs, your Java or a C Sharp code produces a particular set of output. But with machine learning, the challenge is that many times your machine learning model, as and when it iterates over multiple experiment cycles, what happens is your accuracy or whatever is the means of measurement of or the means to evaluate your machine learning model, that keeps on increasing or decreasing depending on what kind of input parameters you have defined. And your, say, the other difference between a normal software development cycle and a machine learning development cycle is that software development, you have been given a set of features, you develop your models, you develop your code, and it is pushed to production. But the problem with machine learning is that it is mostly dependent on the data, and we know that data changes over a period of time. So what happens is many times we need to, say, retrain our models as well, because the model the model is as good as the data. So we understand that the data as well changes over the time. So we need to track our models, keep a record of which model is gone into the production and things like that. So the like I think people are getting added themselves, or sorry for that. So I'm taking y'all to and fro from the window, but I have no means but to keep on adding people. Yeah. So now the problem becomes that with multiple versions of data as well, you try developing your model and try to, say, evaluate your models or train your models. The many times what happens is that there is no single place wherein you would be able to imagine, backtrack your models and see that you are given you are given to develop a predictive model wherein you are using, say, linear regression you are using, and you are trying with multiple data sets. Now there is no means wherein you make I would say that there is no means wherein you keep track of how the data has changed and how your models are performing. So it's kind of an iterative process, and what happens is during this iteration, if somebody asks you that can you go to the first iteration where you started your project, and could you tell me that what was the data we've used, or what was the I would say that what was the measure of the model pre- during the previous sixth iteration of your evaluate model that you built. So in such cases, what happens is it becomes very challenging for you to go back and see that in you started building your model in the month of January on 1st of January, and until 10th of January you tried using different data sets and tried to improve the accuracy or the evaluation matrix of your model. And slowly what happens is on 15th of January, when you're presenting your model to your business, the business says that I understand this is what is the best for me, but could you please let us know that how you arrived at this conclusion, or why when you say that my model number 10 is better than the model iteration 8 or better than model iteration 7, how do you claim that? In such cases, what happens is you completely lose track of how your model has evolved over a period of time, and how say but things have changed because there was no central repository sometimes. So but that's one of the problems. Also it happens that, imagine that there is a failure in the system due to the current model, but the current model started failing. By the time you could evaluate this model, see what the issue is, there is no way wherein you can have a backup plan of your model wherein you could go back to the previous version, try to roll back and things like that. Imagine you want to put a new iteration in production, and what happens is all of a sudden you do see that the current version is failing. So what do you do? Do you keep the people waiting until you correct the model, or you backtrack and redeploy the previous model? So such kind of a registry and things were missing during the earlier days. So even I already talked about comparing the results of different versions of the model. So basically, when the business users ask, why should I believe that your 10th version of your model is better than the 8th version? Or if at all, I believe that whether you carried on 10 iterations to arrive at this conclusion. I'm not sure of that, right? So the model explainability comes into picture over here, how you would explain the evolution of your model. So these are some of the common challenges which the data science community faces currently. Now, one of the tools which helps, there are many open source tools as well available in the market, but here we are talking more in terms about the cloud offerings that are present in the Microsoft Azure environment. So that is where, say, many of the organizations use Azure Databricks. Azure has its own machine learning platform as well called the Azure Machine Learning. So these are some of the offerings which are present in the Microsoft Azure marketplace, which the data science community or the data engineering community or the more matured MLOps community, which helps the data science people to put machine learning into production, could utilize one of the tools. It's not that this is the only tool present, but yeah, this is one of the tools which people already onto the Azure cloud platform can leverage the functionality. So Azure Databricks is a unified analytics platform, which is basically, I would say that uh, a common place wherein you could the data science, the data engineer could work on developing a model and tracing it back until production. So that's one of the unified analytics platform provided by Microsoft on their platform. See, it has, I would not take you through much of theory over here. Rather, I would basically show you what data. So this is basically when you, I assume most of us are aware of the Microsoft Azure platform. So you just need to go over here, click on, say, search for Azure Databricks, and it's nothing but a managed Spark clusters, which helps us to say productionize or use unified analytics model over here. So you would workspace Databricks workspace would be created, and you could launch your workspace. Once you are there, the very first thing is you could go to your compute platform and you could say create a cluster. So while creating a cluster is nothing but a set of virtual machines which are enabled for you uh, at instance for running your machine learning platform, machine learning code in a kind of a serverless managed environment. So if you see, you could very well relate it to the machine configurations. So it is nothing but see a 14 GB machine with 4 cores, a 28 GB machine with 4 cores, 8 cores, a 56 GB machine. So you, depending on the loads, you could select, you even have, I would say, GPUs for this, GPUs as well for your custom vision and your video analytics and things like that. You could just uh, uh, provision for getting started with your machine learning, right? So you have a workspace by say data engineering people as well can start on their workspace, machine learning data science people as well can start on their workspace. So it's pretty simple. You, once you come to your workspace, you, there would be if there are number of users, number of workspaces would be there. So each user will have his own workspace wherein he could develop the project or code independently of the other person without the security constraints of say the other person coming into my workspace and checking it. No, that's not a possibility. So imagine that if we add more people over here in my organization, what happens is more and more people keep on getting added, but my way of working or my code, those guys would not be able to accept except the admins. We see people getting added. So yes, so yeah, so everybody is there. So yeah, this is a brief overview of the uh, Databricks platform. So it basically Spark is a I would say that a very not a reset one, but uh, a go-to solution for all your machine learning models wherein uh, wherein say processing happens within a spark of a second, and that's why it's called Spark, because it's mostly in memory. And people who are coming from the Hadoop background, it's just say an evolution from the big data Hadoop platform to the Spark environment, and widely being used across the industry now for for writing their machine learning codes and things like that. So imagine once you are here in your workspace, you could just go ahead and you could create a notebook environment everybody is familiar with. I will not go into those details. So once you click on a notebook, you could give the name of the notebook. Imagine that prediction model for uh, diabetes dataset. Just, and what are the languages it supports? People coming from Python background, the data science community, Python and R widely used over here. The SQL community or the DBA community who does not, I would not say who does not know, but yeah, who have difficulty in understanding Python and R, they as well could work on their SQL environment using this platform's SQL capabilities. And Scala is a refined form of say Scala is the platform on which Spark was built, and people coming from the Java background will be having a seamless transition from Java to Scala object oriented programming, wherein you could write your code, basically the machine learning code or say your exploratory data analytics code and things like this. You could use Scala. So just imagine you click on Python and then you need to attach a cluster. Why do you need to attach a cluster? Because now when I'm speaking to you, Teams window is open. It means that Teams some like something is getting in the background, like Teams need a storage capacity as well as processing capacity. Everything in a computer is zeros and ones at in the end, and processing and storage is the very basic necessity for any performing any task on a computer or a laptop. That is where your clusters come into picture, wherein you attach your clusters to your notebook, meaning that once you run the code in the notebook, what happens is this code would be executed rather than your own personal machines, laptop, or your own personal laptop RAM and hard disk, it would use the clusters or the virtually provisioned machines for you, which is basically in form of a cluster over here. So see, you could create a cluster as I said, and the runtime environment as well you could provide over here. And that's it, you could select a list of machines. One good advantage is, you see, with this you could scale. So imagine that you can scale from say a 14 GB 4 core machines from 2 to 8 depending on your uh, size of the computation which you are using. So that's the capability Databricks platform brings into picture now. So that now that we have discussed, we would be sharing the PPTs, and also I would not take you through much of a theoretical aspects. Very quickly, a common ML reference architecture, and then I would go into the practical part. So see, this is a very basic reference architecture for any of the machine learning models which people develop. So on the very left hand side would be your ingestion framework, wherein you would ingest data from different sources, be it in batch or in streaming format, and then basically the data transpires through three versions, from the bronze layer to the silver layer to the gold layer, which is nothing but, I would say, terminologies on how how refined my data is. Bronze, we know that it's all the impurest form, not the impurest form, but impure metal, wherein you would have a lot of outliers and things like that in your data. So your data might not be clean. Same, source data as it to the bronze layer. From there you keep on refining the data, so that only until the gold layer, where you would have removed all the outliers and you would have done all the null value treatments, so that my model is my data is good to start doing analysis on the data. Because we know that a garbage in is a garbage out. So imagine you just dump the bronze data to your, wherein data is not in a proper structure, or it does not have outliers removed, or null value treatments done. Then what happens is your model might not be a very effective model, because you are just working on a garbage kind of a data. So stages of data evolution, and then once the data you feel is ready to be fed or develop a model from here, that is where you see enriched or the gold layer comes into picture. So now once you have the data in your gold layer, what happens is, by the time data engineers provide the data in the gold layer, the data scientists by this time already understand that I need to develop, say, based on a use case, I need to develop a logistic regression problem or a linear regression problem and an XGBoost, whatever. So they would have already developed the model. Now the only point is, the moment my gold data is ready, they would change the configuration of their input data to the gold layer of my data lake, and the model proceeds from there. Now everything all well and good, but the challenge comes thereafter, wherein once your model is ready to be say consumed by the outside world, how would you go about exposing it to the outside world? So imagine previously people used to deploy as web API using Flask framework on Python and all, but now it's not only about say single people using it. There, imagine your machine learning model being consumed by people across the world, and wherein you need to have the capability of scaling up and scaling down based on the traffic on my models and things like that. Okay, so there is where say the Azure Kubernetes clusters or Azure container instances come into picture. Okay, so now uh, so what came into picture in the DevOps world was something called the Docker containers. So very quickly, I would like to discuss what a container Docker is basically. So prior to the uh, DevOps and the Docker world, how people used to deploy the any of the code which they used to develop, they used to write code on their development machine and do an .exe or a .binary, and then what, they would give it to the release engineers. They would try to release it in the server. The problem many times it would happen is that the code which was working in your normal machine never used to work on the server machine. Because imagine developing a code on a normal Windows XP or a Windows say Windows Millennium or Windows 10 or a Windows 11 machine, and then the same code being pushed onto a server with Windows Server configuration, and there would be a difference of say software installed as well. So many times the dependencies problems used to arise and our code did not used to work in the production. That is how say containers and Docker instances came into picture. So Docker is nothing but it's basically how you package your uh, you how do you package your machine learning model. Basically, I assume all of you are from the data science background, wherein you understand that you have a pickle file and things like that generated when you write a Python code and compile it. So basically what happens is when you compile it on a normal machine, the dependencies do not come along with your compilation. But what happens is, see, it is inside Docker image. When you say that I'm building an image for my Docker deployment, what happens is along with the binary exes, all the dependencies which are required for running your model or running your code as well is completely encapsulated and it comes to you. Now what happens is once your Docker image is ready, you could deploy it on containers. So containers are nothing but these are rather than having a monolithic big say a very big monolithic big ice cream counter wherein you have 5 different slots. So imagine your virtual machine or your server as a very big slot machine wherein uh, one slot is for say uh, uh, milk, one slot is for cold drink, one slot is for say ice cream and things like that. Okay, you just put money on that machine and make a selection. I want milk, milk comes out. I want say cold drink comes out. That is how your normal monolithic architecture works. But the problem becomes like imagine that if there is a failure in one of the slots of that big machine, imagine that the milk the thing which from where milk was coming, there is a problem in that part. What happens is your whole machine goes for a downtime because we understand that even there was a problem in one part of the machine, or here particularly the milk part, the milk dispensing part. But until the machine is up, your cold drink dispenser does not work, your ice cream dispenser does not work, and the complete business is at a loss. So rather than this, just imagine that one big machine with multiple slots. Let me have small machines with single slots, like one small machine for dispensing ice cream, one small machine for dispensing chocolates, one small machine for dispensing cold drink, and one small machine for dispensing milk. So how did we do? We separated into small chunks and then all the and we separated the concerns. So every machine becomes independent of each other and it functions, and if required it can function together as well. That's a different concept. But yes, so you saw with this approach what happens is the single point of failure and such kind of vulnerabilities are removed in the system. So you could consider like Docker containers to be something of that sort rather than a big monolithic machine having deploying on a big virtual machine. You have small containers within the virtual machine wherein you could deploy your code and it works independently of the other application. So now uh, this is the scenario in normal development environments. But imagine what happens when you want to. I have somebody. Imagine that when I have somebody. Who, imagine if I have some. I want to deploy this code into production environment wherein I don't know how my network traffic will behave. I might have a kind of say. the Black Friday sales or the big billion sales in India, wherein all of a sudden the network traffics on the e-commerce websites increases. So how to handle such kind of situations? So in such kind of situations, what happens is an orchestration engine called Kubernetes comes into picture, which is like a master controlling the herd of the sheeps. So consider the containers to be individual sheeps, wherein they don't work in sync alone. But yes, once you have a shepherd with I would say stick in his hand, they make the people, but they make the sheep go in line and cater to the needs. So you see that with this is a Kubernetes engine is something which is able to scale up or scale down and keep a control on your containers. If your container, one of your containers in a group goes down, then it needs to bring up the another container to serve your model needs and things like that, right? So Kubernetes is an open source, it's an orchestration platform deploying, managing and scaling containerized application. So it's nothing that it's just that when you have multiple containers working together to serve a common purpose, it means that a shepherd should be there in the herd of sheep with sticks in his or her hand, so that once the sheep tries to go out of the line, he just manages and keeps him in control. So basically that's the job of a Kubernetes, wherein it keeps all the container live and productive, and if there's a downtime or things like that, it takes care of that. So with this concepts in place, let's go to the practicals which we are supposed to do now. I will share the, I assume that we all are aware of, say, because I would talk about, say, some of the machine learning model concepts and all. I assume we all are aware of that, because this is not a core data science demo which we are trying to do over here. It's just basically how you would package your models as a Docker image, deploy it in Azure Container Instances, and deploy it in Azure Kubernetes services. Okay, and how do we use, say, ML4 platform for of Databricks and Azure Machine Learning? So prior to this, what you need to do is you need to create a machine learning workspace for. Just let me open it so that I could show what are the prerequisites for this. Yeah, by the time it opens up. Yes, so what you would need Azure Machine Learning Platform, you would need Azure Databricks Workspace, and yeah, apart from that, nothing, because we are mostly concerned on developing model in Azure Databricks and deploying it in Azure Container Services or Azure Kubernetes Services for. This is groups. Yeah. So you see, this is my master resource group, wherein I say imagine that Azure Machine Learning Workspace is created. Azure Machine Learning Workspace would look something of this sort. Let it be launched by the time we go, and then you have a, yeah, you have a Azure Databricks service. The primary two prerequisites for this. Okay. So by this time, if anybody has any doubts, feel free to ask, or else we would. But I'm just taking you to the notebooks. If anybody has any doubts in this, let me know, please. So we will. What we would do first is that uh, we talked about the common problem of, say, no means to track the algorithms, or no means to track the historical how my model has evolved over a period of time. So we would talk about that first. So what we would do is first see what here I'm just taking the, yeah, I will somebody asked that you, yeah, so what I would do is I would import this notebook and I would give it to you as a dbc.dbc. I would share it. I have the team's invite wherein after this session I would share the PPT as well as the .dbc, which is like the Databricks compilation. And you, once I give you a DBC code, what you need to do is you just need to uh, come to your workspace and see. There's also an easy way. You need to come into your workspace and then you see you will have an export or an import. So what now I'm trying to do, what I would do is I can export your notebooks, and when I would export this notebook, what you guys need to do is imagine that I would just ex- yeah, I'm exporting this notebook. Okay, I will export it as a DBC archive and then let it go there. This files I will give it to you, so you make changes according to your needs. Yeah, so you make changes according to your needs, and then based on your needs, and then you could go ahead and do it. Okay, and how you would do it, this DBC archive I have over here, you would go to your particular workspace, you could create folders and all, and then what you need to do, see what I did, I exported it, and what you need to do, you need to import it. So the code will come as it to your workspace, and then you change the settings and you could try running it. Okay, what you do is you could even go to a URL if you are downloading it from a public file, but here because I will give you the .bc, what are expected, .dbc, .scala, .py, all the notebook extensions, right? If you are writing a code in .py, Python, .sql, .r, and things like that. So you just need to browse and import your this DBC notebook. You just need to click on over here, open, and you could import. Okay, that's it. That as simple as that, and then you could run this notebook, making changes as per your needs or as per your subscriptions and resource group. Those things you need to. So basically everything, the data science community people, I know you know everything what we are trying to do over here. So from the sklearn, what I'm downloading a diabetes data set over here. Okay, everything, you just imagine you write your prediction logic using Python, or in this case PySpark, write it. Okay, now bring your code over here, your say classification code, or your what do we have, your say prediction code, classification code, clustering code, whatever is there, whatever machine learning algorithm applies to everything. Okay, bring it over here. Just few important points to note down over here. You see, import MLflow and MLflow. So what is it? It is an MLflow is an open source platform provided by say Databricks for tracking your experiments. Okay, that is what extra add this MLflow and MLflow sklearn, and then what you do is will run this command. Okay, so one way to run the command is say you just go over here and you see run the cell. Okay, I can also do one thing, I can run everything if I'm sure that everything runs well, but okay, let's not be that confident because many times things fail. So one by one I'll run the things. Okay, so in this cell what I have done is I have taken the sklearn sample data set of diabetes, and then here two in this section only two important things which might be new to you, or for people who are already using Databricks they might know it. You need to import MLflow. Why we are importing MLflow? So that we could track our experiments and the outputs and the inputs provided at each iteration. Okay, so now basically this one also, this is a this is what this is a uh, this is the point where you are writing your basically prediction logic and things like you are taking the coefficients of your model and things like that. We will not go into the details of this because we are not here for the data science thing. Okay, now what you do is see training and test, everybody understands. You divide your data into say 80-20 or 70-30 rule and train the data on 70 and test it on 30, or train the data on 80 and test it on 30. So next step is you train your model, and evaluate matter, what is the evaluation matrix of your data. So see, we are just splitting into say 0.75 and 2.25, and then what we are doing is our evaluation matrix. So see, your evaluation matrix differs based on the algorithms. It could be say area under the curve, it could be say root mean r square, it could be a say it could be an r square, it could be a confusion matrix, depending on whatever you are using it. Okay, so here now comes now comes the important part. Okay, firstly, while what did you do in your experiment? You started ML flow. Now in this, what you need to do is you need to track the parameters. That is one of the things which you want, right? What input were supplied to your model and what output you got from your model, right? The input parameters supplied and the evaluation of your model matrix. These two are very prime basic. For iteration 1, data 1 was supplied and evaluation 1 came. Iteration 2, data 2 was supplied, evaluation 2 came. Data iteration 3, data 3 was supplied, evaluation 3 came, right? So this is very important over here because that is what you want to track, right? Previously people the data people in my previous organizations and all, they used to do it via when I joined them, I asked them how they told that we maintain an Excel sheet for that. So that was pretty tedious, right? In this automation world, people doing Excel sheet and all. So uh, here what you want to do is, see, you need to start your ML flow first. Okay, anything, see, before writing to a log file or something, what you do, you open your file and then you write all the parameters captured during any experimentation. We will go to the old world wherein we were doing or developing normal codes, wherein we used to write say log files for the steps, when it started, when the function ended, what parameters were things. And so before that you used to open the file, right? So similarly here what you need to do is you need to start your ML flow server. And ML flow server comes in two variants. One is you could deploy it within your servers as well, open source things, or what you, rather than that, what we would consider to use the managed instance. Similarly, see, Databricks has a community edition, which is not a managed edition. We are coming from the Microsoft Azure background. Azure has provided us everything, so let's utilize what Azure has provided. Okay, so we will use the managed instance of ML flow, wherein say we will use the server hosted within the Databricks itself, the ML flow servers hosted. So nothing, we just need to start the ML flow, where you would write this line, this with MLflow dot start run. You should write it only at a place from where you want to start capturing the matrix, right? So that is what we are doing over here. See, I'm printing what is the output of this particular evaluation matrix, and what are the parameters I have supplied to it within this with MLflow dot start run before closing the ML flow, right? So this is what it means. This is an important line with ML flow dot start underscore run. Inside this, whatever I want to log in, I can log it to parameters of my ML flow. See, that is what I'm doing. What I'm doing, I'm printing my root mean square, I'm printing my R2 values and things like that. Okay. Now, similarly, what are my inputs to this particular this one? What are my inputs to this particular model? The alpha value, the ratio, the and all these things. See, these are the parameters and these are the metrics I got. I'm if I'm writing this within my ML flow things. Okay, so what we do, we'll just run this and see it writes it. Okay, okay. Now, yeah, now comes the important part. So basically what we would do over here is, see, now I want to train the this one. Now I want to train my diabetes data set, right? So what are my, I'll provide my data and my input values to it. We'll go to train diabetes, that function C. What are the input? So you see, trained here, see, your data and alpha and ratio are the input value it wants. Okay, so here first iteration I am running with what? With my alpha value at 0.01 and my L1 value as 0.01. Okay, let's run it. This is one of the runs. Okay, so it runs. See, you see my evaluation matrix has been printed over here, that okay, my RMSC is one, my R2 is this one. These are data science concepts which you might, if you are working in the data science community, you should be aware of it. Let's not display the images and all over here, because anyways we don't want to do any exploratory data analytics. Okay, now see, coming to part 2. Okay, so here what we did, we ran experiment with data 0.01 as input and 0.01 as second input. Now what we will do, we will say data, we will run with 0.01 as the first input and 0.075 as the second input. Okay, we'll run this. So you see, this is my second iteration, because after seeing the image, sitting with my data scientist, I realized that okay, this is not something I want. Let me re-experiment with giving different set of inputs. Okay, so my for different set of input, different set of output comes. Okay, so similarly you could go on iterating and iterating and iterating. Okay, now what happens is you keep on running, and you different how much ever iteration you want. This is the iteration which I was talking about, right? How to capture, and I would show now where exactly you are capturing it. Hmm? So we ran this. Okay, so okay, we have imagined that we have trained our model and we have logged the matrix. Now, where did MLflow logged your matrix? How would you see that? So do you see? See, these are adding comments and all. I would not go. This is not the Databricks class. So what we would do, see, you see a funnel shape over here, or I would say a this flask kind of a thing on the extreme right side. Click over there and it sees, see, use the MLflow API tracking to record runs from the notebook. So this, so do you see? See, I ran so many experiments over here, and see what, imagine that now itself I ran one of the experiment with, see, alpha as 0.01 and L ratio as 1, alpha as 0.01, L ratio as 0.5, alpha as 0.01, L ratio as 0.75. So try to relate it to these things. See, we will, the last one is, it will be from descending order. So see, 0.01 and 1. This is the last value, right? See, 0.01 and 1. So if I want to now, what we would do is we would present it to the business, and we would say to those to the business people, or to the data science people will say to the business, see, when I ran my prediction model with alpha as 0.01 and ratio as 1, I got a root mean square of say 63.25. So my model was say 63.25% accurate. Okay, when I ran my model with, imagine this was not the case, what you would do, you came to know that okay boss, my model 67.98 is what out of some of the models over here. See, this is 71.4 as well. So imagine I just take this with alpha value as 0.01 and L1 ratio as 0.0, and I say deploy this model, this version of the model, deploy it in production. Now they would say that how and why should I deploy? You say the value is the model is predicting outputs with 71.4% accuracy, but why do I believe? Can you show me what you have done? In that case, what you could do, now you have a means to go ahead and show individual that okay, why say, I would open this in one tab, and we would open, say, when somebody asks, my business user asks me this question, what I could do is I could go and I would show them the experiment. See, individually, nothing. Go to, I'll close this again. Okay, from your, yeah, go to this MLflow experiment, the funnel shape on the right side. Okay, click on that and you would see the multiple versions of the model which I have which you have done. Imagine this model will be here till from the time you have started, so everything will be done over here. So imagine that I have run this model at today morning 7 a.m. as well, just for testing that everything is working fine. So see, that time as well, it has logged in from. So from the moment you have started your experiments, it will keep on logging in. So say imagine morning I had run the experiments, and again now during the demo I started running the experiments, right? Everything is being tracked over here, and that is where now you could go to the business and you could show to them, okay, this is my experiment ID. Let's copy this experiment ID would be needed for deployment. Why? Because see, my first iteration is different from second, my second iteration is different from third, my third iteration is different from fourth. Now what I would see is out of the, and this is, you could go to the individual window and show them, okay buddy, see, this is the, you could even write notes over here so that somebody later sees that, okay, we can write a note that this is the production one model, right? Out of 10 models, this is the model I have pushed in production. This is the so now you see what are the parameters you passed on to the input, what are the matrix you got, and things like that. You see all the matrix evaluation matrix that come over here. These are like all the .pickle files and all which is generated, which could be used. But here our concern is to deploy it in Azure container instances and things like that, right? Now you showed them the difference, that see why this model is different from other. Now coming to the second part of the notebook, wherein we want to deploy the model in Azure container instances, and we want to bridge between. So you see what happens is we will these are some of the prerequisites, but yeah, I'll speak about that. But prior to that, first let's do one thing. Let's understand this is the model which I want to put into production, okay? Because the MAE was RMSE 69 and this model uh, RMSE 63. So out of 63.25 and 65, what I would do, this is a better, looks to be a better model for me. The business is also aligned. So what I do is I'll copy this experiment ID and I will keep it with myself. Okay. Let's keep it so that this experiment ID, and see, everything can be parameterized over here, not a concern on that part. Now what we talked, that we would create our machine learning models using the capability of Sparks in the uh, uh, using the capability of Spark in the Azure Databricks environment. And then what we do is we will host it using the Azure container instances in the Azure Microsoft Azure cloud environment. Just to say this one, our let it run because it takes some times. By this time I explain, it will run. So what happens is uh, your Azure machine learning is a first party. I would say that it is something which Microsoft has built and provided to you. Very similar features, lot of features, or it has model registry and things like that. Model deployment endpoint using machine learning in Azure as well you can do. So both Azure Databricks and our Azure machine learning complement each other. So we have to know a way to work like which part of the load should be in say Databricks, which part in Azure machine learning. Based on your use cases, you could decide on that. But these two technologies complement each other. Okay, so now the very first thing is when two systems want to interact, what you have to do, you need to provide say a handshake mechanism, right? Like, okay boss, in Azure or in my resource group or in my subscription, I might have multiple Azure machine learning workspace, but which is the machine learning workspace which you would need to connect to? And that is where in the initial stage when we created Azure machine learning, I'm not taking you through creating Azure machine learning, but you see what all things I would need. I would need the workspace name, obviously, because I might have multiple workspace. Like imagine that I can have HR machine learning workspace where I'm just deploying human resource related machine learning models. Legal machine learning workspace where all legal department machine learning. Sales machine learning workspace wherein only sales departments machine learning are there. So that's namespace configuration which we do. So the very first thing I need to provide in my this is the code wherein you are making your Databricks and connection between your Databricks and your Azure Machine Learning. What all things you need to provide? See the workspace name. So what is your workspace name? Your machine learning. When you create a Azure Machine Learning model, you need to provide a machine learning. So it's a name of your which machine learning you want to use. So here I'm using Analytics Machine Learning Workspace I have created for my experiment. Okay, you give that. You give the location where exactly your machine learning workspace is hosted. You give the location, then you give the resource group name. So sorry, you see, every we know the basics of cloud, everything has to be under a particular resource group and subscription. You copy the resource group, put it over here. Okay, and then what? Your subscription ID, you will get the details in your page as well, right? Which subscription your uh, machine learning workspace is hosted into. Put these configurations over here and you click on run. Now what happens is two different systems are interacting with each other, right? So cross platform integration is happening. Azure machine learning workspace and your Azure Databricks notebook is trying to interact. This is what. Yeah, so the cross for this this is a security thing which Microsoft just for security reason, what it happens is this is a cross platform integration happening. So it asks you to authenticate that whether I'm actually it's me who is using or the cloud provider who has signed it is using it. Okay, so we just need to click on yes and yes. So it what is happening, a handshake mechanism is developed. See, only continue to download the app from website if you trust. Okay, I trust it because I myself want my Azure machine learning and my Azure Databricks to work together, right? That is where I see you have signed on to Microsoft Azure cross platform command line interface application on your device. So what, why it is cross platform? Because see what happens is your sometimes what happen, see Databricks is one of the platforms as a service. Your it's a software as a service, but still okay, one of the platforms to run. Azure machine learning is also one of the platforms to run. Now what you're doing, you want to merge and work seamlessly with both of them. That is where your this command line interface or cross platform, it happens the same way when you try to integrate say your Snowflake to your Azure Databricks as well. Such kind of cross platform integration happens because Snowflake is also a different platform. And so this so now what, see you have logged in now. So what I did, using the Azure Databricks notebook, I have logged into my Azure Machine Learning Studio, right? Now what I would do is, very first thing is let's build a now I would say that uh, out of 4 or 5 experiment, which experiment ID I want to put into production, I have taken a note of this experiment ID, right? What I would do is I would say that, see, you have done 10 iterations of your model, but only one iteration you would want to productionize it or expose it to the people, which is like most efficient. Say the model with 65.39 or 4 percentage. Rest all are say 62, 61, 50, 40. I don't want it to expose to people. So what we would do is we would put this experiment ID over here and the experiment model URI as well over here. So this is something which, see, it will run now. Yeah, once this runs, then what we need to do is, see, model. Now the second step is, what do you want to do over here? We are building the model for my you are building the model for here. What you do, you build the image of your model, right? What is the image here? Let's go to the previous section. Yes. So you see what we are doing over here. We are collating all the dependencies and we are creating an image. So see, when a person sees himself in a mirror, it is like he's seeing an exact replica of himself. So when I want to deploy this into production, this whole model pickle files which are generated, what I need to do, I need to encapsulate it as an image with all the dependencies so that it could be productionized using my container instances. So here, that is what we are doing it. Okay, what I would do, I'll say run, let it run by this time. No? and then this part of the code will take little time, at least 15 minutes it might take, creating the model image. Because what, see, when you say, when the model gets created, it, all the dependencies, all the libraries which we are using within your uh, model building has to come over here, right? That is what, and only that you could deploy it in your container instances, right? So this is a command to do that. Now it will run and it would start. So this will take at least 15 minutes time, because you understand creating all the dependencies and all how it takes. So it will do that. Okay. Now after that we will come to the Azure container instances, creating first. Let that model get created. Let's wait for that to get created. By that time I would be happy to take any of your questions if you have. If anybody has any questions, concerns, please do let me know. So I hope you guys followed, because see, there is, I would not say that there is a very big rocket science over here, wherein you, commands, we have a pre-built set of commands. You need to do, follow so and so step, pre-built set of commands, do it. And yeah, there are prerequisites like the cluster should be, say, an ML cluster and things like that. So that uh, okay, I do see some somebody has written. Okay. Do, yeah, the link, anyways, I told I would be, I will archive it as a .dbc and send it to you guys. So by the time it's running, it actually takes some time. So yeah, part one is already exported. Part two, what I would do, I would export it, okay, as a DBC archive, so that it can be passed on to you guys as an after session. Yeah, and when these things are going on, so yeah, let's come over here. What do you see over here? See, where are we building our models? Where is my image being built? See, my image is being built over here, right? And I would like to happen. Yeah. So my model is building over here, and you see what's happening in my Azure Machine Learning Studio. See, it is giving some notification. You see, image build model in progress. That is why that cross platform integration was required, because see, we are firing our build of the image from here, okay, from our Azure Databricks. And you see, in my Azure machine learning model, the model image is being built over here. Okay. So see, the previous two models which this is the model which is being, see, the model version 2 is being developed over here. Model version 1, I was just checking that everything is working fine. So what, it deployed at 7 a.m. in the morning. So see, from my Azure, and see, you could even create a model over here, register and all. Both can work independently as well. But here the point is, we are trying to make the best use of both the world, wherein we are utilizing Spark clusters of Azure Databricks to develop our model so that it runs quickly, and then using the, and that is as well on Azure. And I'm using my Azure container instances and Azure Kubernetes services to expose my model as an endpoint. So by the time it is running over here, it takes time, 15 minutes, 10 minutes it takes at least. So by the time it is developing, imagine that how I would like to expose my model to the outside world. One of the cases is, you would have seen, say, uh, the lot of house rental websites, or lot of, say, old we- websites wherein I do see that there are people from outside India as well who might have. I'm not giving a particular example of Indian content, but you would have seen a lot of websites where, say, who don't. you do a prediction on the house prices, like what is the rental in one particular community. There is a second hand or uh, a website wherein you could purchase old motorbikes or old cars. So there what happens is you go, you feed the details of your car, your bike, and then what happens is you get an output in terms of, okay, your car model is say a Chevrolet and your make year is 2010, then and your location is say uh, Australia. This should be the price of your uh, this should be the price of your car based on the location and the data you have given. So how these things happen? Such kind of models are there in the backend. You feed the input on the website. Your website click on submit button. Your website calls the web service which would be hosted somewhere, and then you get the output, right? So you're getting how this relation works. Now I will expose this model as a web interface, web API, so that any web UI would be able to hook my web service with the inputs provided, and I would get the output out of it, and I would post it. I would display it on my website that, okay, a Chevrolet car made of 2000 in location Australia should cost you without any accidents, no. Insurance lapse, yes, would cost so many dollars, right? This is what is an application which we develop using this. Let's see this one. Yeah, you see the image creation got succeeded, right? So we'll come here and see got look at my model version 2 is also ready. See, image build model completed. Now what we do is, now once my model is created, what we can do is we can go ahead and see. What I would do is I would create a Azure container instance for it, right? So this is also what I'm doing. See my service name, and I'm deploying the image. What the model image which I just created now, you see, this is the image of the model. What I did, I created an image of the model. Now I would deploy it on my Azure container instance, that image of the model. What are my container instances? They are nothing but small Linux machines working independently of each other. Okay, so the same thing what we would do, we would create a container instance. Okay, let it go, and then what? Yeah, because it should always be, it should be there. Depth with the same name already exit. Yeah, so let's not deploy it once again because I deployed it. So this is the way to okay, let me one thing, let me deploy it model uh AZ. Okay, let's deploy it. Okay, because my first model name was it's already one model was already deployed by this. In Azure, it's always good to just utilize lowercase characters because that's a standard. Many of the, whether it's storage account or anything, see, it will run. And diabetes model AZ conf. Then what we will do, we would create a container instance. Okay, and then once that is created, what we need to do, we need to sample vector. So what is a sample vector? When I talk about i I am developing a product or I am developing a website wherein I would expose the people of India. I would give them a product wherein they give the make of the car, the model of the car, the year the car was manufactured, say whether the insurance have lapsed, whether the car has met with any accidents. They give these 5 parameters to me, which is an input vector to my model. What I predict to them is that, okay, for so and so model, so imagine a Ford Motors car, 2015 make, with insurance lapsed and no accident, should cost in Bangalore, should cost me say 8 lakhs INR. Just this would be the output way. So anybody asking me that, okay, for so and so car with the same model they give, and they say that these guys are quoting like 9.2 lakhs INR, or 9.2 million, I would say. In that case, what I say, no, I think from what one of the products I have seen, that this car should not be worth more than 8 million. But okay, I'm willing to pay 8.1 or 8.2 million as well, but 9.5 is too much, because I don't think the car is much value at that cost, right? So that can be one of the use cases which you could do over here. So it will wait for deployment and it will take some time. Yeah, you see, we are getting the game. See, it's been solved. Once my code is ready for deployment, then what we can do is I can query it. So what I'm basically doing over here, see, input vector I have created, and then what I can do is, example, I'm passing as a, see, I'm request my scoring UI URI I have developed, and the data which I'm creating over here, this data, I will pass it on and I will get the output, right? So my predictions will be returned. Just let's see, hopefully it gets created and then we can. Yeah, so guys, any doubts anybody has by the time it's running? If you have any queries or questions, do let me know. There are other ways of deploying the model as well. This is not the only way. So one of the ways for, and especially this model you could use for real time prediction. You could use for all your real time predictions. Models which don't use a batch processing, because see, models you could deploy, models which would run in batch, there would be models which used to run in real time. Okay, so this is one of the ways I would. There are other deployment models as well. I have discussed in one of the blogs. So you could just go through this link in your free time, so that yeah, here I talk about 3 to 4 type of deployment models which you can use in your model. Yeah, guys, if you have any queries, please do let me know. Yeah. So see, you see, our service AC Azure container instance has been created. Where we can go and see it, I would see, we would refresh this. We would refresh our resource group and let's see. Let's close this and see in detail. So you see, see my diabetes model, which was say a model created early morning just for checking, and you see we created this now, right? This is the container instance that has come now. Let's see. Azure container has been created now. Let's go to, yeah, let's load the data. So now we loaded the data. We'll create the sample input vector. So how, yeah, so we are what did I receive? Say 181.73 is the output of this model based on the set of inputs which we have provided, right? And from where it gave, this is the endpoint or the Azure container instance where it has been hosted. Okay, so yeah, this is what I wanted to show you during this time.